Good evening and welcome to the Shepherd Center of Charlotte Solutions for Seniors. I'm Linda Pellerin, the Executive Director of the Shepherd Center of Charlotte. It's a nonprofit organization. It's designed to help seniors stay in their home environment for as long as possible. And this evening, our guest is Beverly Mosley. She's the Executive Director of Summit Place of South Park, which is an assisted living and memory care facility. And she's here to talk about just senior housing in general and a few other things as they come up. But Beverly, thank you so much for being here.
Sure, thank you.
And I know, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg community and the nation as a whole, and even like the whole world, we've got a lot to learn about aging. Mm-hmm. It's not, we're not our grandparents.
Right. It's not textbook anymore.
Exactly. There's a lot going on. Housing has exploded for seniors, and there's a lot of different options out there. And I know, in talking with the seniors that I work with at the Shepherd Center, many of them are confused. A good portion of them are still living in their own home, mm-hmm. and many of them are living alone in a big old house, but that's the way they like it, and that's the way they want to stay for a while. And they've considered moving into a facility or a community, mm-hmm. and they get overwhelmed. What are some of the options out there in Charlotte-Mecklenburg now for seniors if they want to go into a senior type community?
Right. And you're right, it can be very overwhelming for our seniors, and the great news is that there are lots of options. They have many options, and it really depends on the needs of the senior, what their interests are, what their main needs are. They could stay at home with services, with home health, companion, private duty sitters, things like that, or they could choose to go into a residential environment, something like an assisted living community that offered either assisted living or memory care, depending on what their needs were, and then skilled nursing. So there's a whole progression of options for seniors just based on what their needs are. But the great news is there are options. So it's really important to determine what those needs are, find out what's most important to them from a healthcare standpoint, from a socialization standpoint, nutrition management, medication management, and find out exactly what those needs are and then determine what the right path is for them.
Okay, so, and I know in talking with some of the seniors, they went, well, I might move into this community because I ran into somebody the other day and it was somebody I went to high school with, mm-hmm. and I know they're over there. So I think sometimes the decision isn't even, they don't even care, how good is the food or, what's going on. They just know somebody there.
Absolutely. And the network, then it goes back to the socialization, the network of folks that are involved in those communities. And just like you said, they may have gone to church with those folks, grown up with those folks. And so, it is about the community, but it's also about the network of friends and family that they would have there for them for that support. The transition of moving from home into a residential environment can be wonderful, but it can be challenging and overwhelming at times, and it's a big move. Many of these folks are leaving a home that they've been in for 50, 60 years, a neighborhood of friends that they've seen progress through the aging process as well. And so if they do have a contact at a community or a friend at a community, it certainly makes the transition easier.
Well, you brought this up about, they've been in their home for maybe 50, 60, mm-hmm. sometimes even 70 years.
Right.
And I know that is overwhelming to some of them, just thinking about, what am I going to do with all this stuff? Right. I'm going to move into a community where, and many of the communities have little cottages that you can move into, mm-hmm. but it's still going to be a lot less square footage than what you had in your big old house. And, they may have an attic full of stuff, mm-hmm. and, some of it may belong to their children who just kind of left it there.
Right.
And I think it might just be overwhelming for the entire family when this happens. And, how do they kind of get over some of that? How do they get over that stumbling block?
Sure. I think a lot of it at times is a perception issue too. We have what we find a lot when we work with seniors in their homes and who are making the move to an assisted living community such as ours, that even though they may live in a large home and they may have a lot of stuff, we find that they're really living out of one or two rooms of that house for ease, convenience, sometimes necessity, depending on what their medical need is. And so I think just working with the family and making sure they have good support network at home to help them through that process. the great news there too is that there's lots of resources for them. You know, that where there's a will, there's a way. There's senior movers and senior case managers, geriatric care managers that can help them through that process. So I think just minimizing, you know, when you make a move from home into a senior living community, you're doing that to minimize some of the stress and some of the concern that you have at home, and with that comes a downsizing of space.
Now, there are, getting back to the communities themselves, the senior communities, there are several in Charlotte that are, I guess you would term them the full service ones, where you go in as independent living, and then, you know, as your health deteriorates, if it deteriorates, then, you know, you have assisted living or maybe memory care, and then skilled nursing, and it's all in one big facility where, and I'm seeing now where even some of those facilities are starting to say, well, you know what, it's okay, you know, and they're not charging like a big, you know, there would be this nominal fee to begin with, which is supposed to take you to the end of your life or whatever, and you know, some of them are now kind of changing their thought process, and I think it's because, or you tell me, you know, why is that? Is it that the Charlotte area has more communities that are offering like a month-by-month thing, or what?
Yeah, I think seniors and their families are looking at ways to conserve, you know, their funds. And if when we work with families, a lot of times what they will be telling us is we have, you know, X amount of dollars and we want to use this to the best of mom's needs, and really concentrate on what her needs are and make sure that that money is spent wisely. And also we're seeing people living longer, and so that we have to extend those resources out for a longer period of time. And so I think, you know, for our community, we don't charge one of those entrance fees, and so we allow the family to utilize their funds to really support the care of that person. You know, and there's not as large of a commitment. There are options in Charlotte, and so, you know, I think we've got a more educated customer than we did 10 years ago, and that's great. But with that comes, there's just lots of choices, and so I think they want to use their money wisely. They want to extend it out long term. A lot of folks are working with long-term care insurance, which don't support that upfront fee. They just, you know, pay more of a per month allocation.
Now, I have to say, we are very lucky in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area as far as, you know, senior housing in general goes.
Yes.
And I make my comparison to the small community my parents live in Vermont. And I've mentioned my parents before, and a couple years ago my mom had a health issue, and so I went up to visit and, you know, to check out the situation. My dad is still alive, and they're in a senior apartment right now. And were then, but I was thinking that maybe they needed like assisted living, because I wasn't sure how much my mom was going to come back from her stroke. And so I checked the area, and it was pretty poor as far as the choices that were there. And I really, I mean, I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, oh, you people need to move to Charlotte.
Right.
And of course they're like, no, all our family's here, our friends are here, we're staying here. And I'm like, well, okay, your options are very small.
Right.
I said, in a way that's kind of good because you don't have a lot to choose from. I said, but in a way it's bad because you don't have a lot to choose from.
Sure.
So, so people in Charlotte are very lucky. And do you see in the future, with all the baby boomers, the 78 million, of course they're not all going to be in the Charlotte area, but there's going to be quite a few of them in the Charlotte area, including me, is the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area looking ahead?
Sure, I definitely think so. I think that's a topic of conversation and that's being discussed with most senior living and senior services companies right now, is how do we prepare for the future and how do we prepare for the growth that's coming our way. I think you're going to see companies that expand and grow, not only by acquisition but by just development. And not only, I think, are we looking at preparing for the volume of those seniors, but also the diversity. You know, the baby boomer population is different than our seniors today, and so I think we're going to see some communities that really establish themselves as a niche community and cater to some of that diversity.
We need communities, and I'm speaking for my husband here, we need communities with golf courses. Right. We need communities with big lakes for fishing, and you know, so that the boats can go out on there. I mean, honestly, if you're talking about baby boomers, I think, and the baby boomers I know are either very healthy or they're not.
Right.
You know, they've indulged all their lives. You know, some of them are overweight, some of them already have health issues, and they're not even 60 yet. You know, but you've got the ones that are also healthy, and they're the ones that are going to want to, you know, continue to play the golf and all, and they don't want to go far. You know, if they're going to move into a community that's all service, they want it to be all service. They want a bowling alley on site.
Absolutely. Right.
They want big bingo games.
Right.
They don't want the $5 things. They want the big bingo games.
Sure.
They want, you know, they want, of course, you know, the bridge games and
Right.
all of that.
Coffee shops and
Coffee
everything.
yes, exactly.
Want to be able to Skype with people, and you know, and I think that's what communities and companies are looking at right now is how do we keep up with the demand from a volume perspective and know what's coming down the road, but also create a product or create a service for that senior that is specific to their interest as a baby boomer. You know, what they've grown up through and what their interests are.
And with the economy, though, I mean, you know, years ago there was a senior community that was going to be built down in the southern part of the county, and it didn't happen. I think it was called Windsor Run, and it didn't happen because you know the economy kind of bottomed out, and even though they had a lot of people who had put down payments and everything, they went, you know, this is not the right thing to do right now, and so they didn't build. And do you think the economy, if the economy doesn't come back like we're all hoping it does, that's really going to be a detriment to the baby boomers, isn't it, as far as what our options will be down the road?
Yes, I think definitely anytime you have an economic impact, which is what we've experienced over the last few years, it affects you know any business, and specifically businesses that don't seem to appear to be must-have services, and even though senior living is a must-have service, a lot of folks will wait until there is a crisis or wait until they can't stay at home any longer. And so I think we've seen folks who normally would have moved in a little quicker or chosen a community quicker in their life or made a decision 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, waiting a little bit longer, which you know just adjust your population a little bit. But yeah, I think definitely we're going to have to look into how the economy is going to affect those things, and I could even foresee a different type of senior living coming down the road. You know, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm intrigued to see how we're going to prepare for the baby boomer generation.
Well, you brought that up, okay? Different senior community. I'm gonna grab on that for a little bit and say, if you could design your own senior community, what would you do?
Oh wow, that's a loaded question, but exciting. You know, I think everything what we're experiencing now in senior living is a very traditional, successful product or program, and you know you've got your 3 meals a day and housekeeping services and you know all the standard amenities. But I think where companies will be successful, and if I were starting my own company and doing that on my own, it would be very customized to that particular group of folks. And so if I know that population is motorcycle riding and you know and all those types of things, however you can incorporating their access to different services, so they would have the ability to do the things that they did when they were in the prime of their life, and I think that's something that is going to be ever changing because the population is ever changing.
So, kind of like, and I'm taking this to an extreme, but kind of like maybe have a skydiving community where it's a senior community, but it'll cater to the people who like to skydive.
Right, or even just having a branch of, you know, different, maybe a variety of services or a variety of options for those seniors. And so if someone did have a huge interest and maybe they rode motorcycles their whole life, then having something available for them that they can continue that passion and continue that love, because it's so much a part of who they are. And that's really what senior housing is supposed to be about, is capturing the person of who they really are and allowing them to hold on to that as they age gracefully.
Interesting. Now, let's say you're sitting at home and you're watching this show, and you're either getting ready to retire, or your parents or your grandparents are getting ready to retire. What should be done first?
You know, I think what we see typically are the first steps of that family meeting, of, you know, really whether it is the daughter or the grandchildren or whoever it is that's helping them through that process of really determining what are the most critical things that mom needs or dad needs. Is it, he's been living in his home and he's not eating well, or he just needs oversight with his medication administration, or so really determining what those needs are, how critical they are, because that's really going to determine your time frame. If it's something that is pretty critical and time sensitive, then you may be looking at one option. If it's something that you can plan for a little bit down the road, then that's going to determine your path, if it's going to be independent living or assisted living or skilled nursing, just based on what those needs are. So I think really doing a good assessment of where mom or dad is, what their current situation is, and then how you can support that, whether it be through home health or does it need to be a move.
Mm-hmm. And then you have the personalities of the parent, of the retirees or of the aging.
Right.
For instance, like with my parents, I always like to use them as an example because they're in Vermont and they don't have YouTube,
right.
And so they'll probably never ever see
You're
this
safe.
program. So, but when my mom wasn't well, one of the difficulties I had was convincing them that they need to go into an assisted living place, and they chose not to, and they're still in a little senior apartment, and the extent of the services for them is that I think it's subsidized or something, so their rent is controlled, but there is a manager of the complex, and I think there are like maybe 25 units in the complex, and they're all on the same level, and they're like in a courtyard. And the manager's husband will drive through twice a day to make sure that there are no lights on outside, because those mean that there's someone stuck in their bathroom or something,
Right.
because they do have the little pull thing in the bathroom in case they fall or whatever.
Right.
But I'm like, okay, twice a day, give me a break here.
Sure.
But the reason, and if they were to hear me say this, they would be upset. The reason I allow them
Right.
to stay where they are is because they're both very viable mentally. They're both very clear mentally, and they have each other. And they rarely go anywhere without the other. My dad may go fishing once in a while, and I have a brother that's 6 miles away. So, and they do have a lot of extended family that are around, and really their choices are very limited there. So I've kind of let it stay. Okay, while you're still where you are right now, physically and mentally, it's okay for you to stay here. But, I worry, once in a while my dad will have a health issue. My mom really doesn't drive anymore, and they're 30 miles from the nearest hospital.
Right. And that's not an uncommon response to looking at making a move to a senior living community, whether it be assisted living, independent living, is wanting to hang on to that piece of independence and hang on to their home environment. And I think a lot of times we're dealing with a population of folks or a generation of folks who their only exposure really to a long-term care setting was kind of the old nursing home, convalescent home, and so their exposure to that's limited. And I think for our seniors now that are getting out and making the trips and seeing what's out there and looking at the services and the communities that are available, they're seeing a much different face of senior living, and I think it's much more acceptable and much more exciting now because it's not institutional, it's more of a social model that provides medical care.
Part of the problem with my parents is and I mean, they are social. My dad is Mr. Personality and and everything, but he doesn't want to live near anyone. I mean, they barely get along with the neighbors on each side of them.
Right.
And it's just and if they were to move into a community, they have to share their meals with people and all of this stuff.
Sure.
And so, all right. So, say my brother and I determine that it's time for them to go into a community. How do we approach that? What is there a foolproof way of approaching these very stubborn seniors that just want to dig in and stay where they are?
I wish there was. I would be a millionaire, but there's not. The way that we encourage folks to have those conversations is to just be very honest and very open. And I think sometimes where families struggle and daughters and sons and the primary caregiver struggle is try to tiptoe around it a little too much. I mean, I think, we don't give our seniors enough credit, and, they're smart, well accomplished folks. And so I think, giving them options and giving them a sense of control and independence in the process, but always keeping their safety as the number one concern. And so, if they're safely living at home, then maybe now's not the time to push the topic. But when that safety becomes compromised or the concern grows greater, then that family has to kind of step in and put some type of intervention in place. And whether that's a senior living community or whether it's support services at home, but I think just being open and honest with that person and kind of explaining from your position what you're seeing, and then asking them to be a part of it. But the ultimate goal is to make sure they're in the right environment.
We were actually visiting one time when my dad had a health issue, and we ended up meeting him and my mom at the hospital, and found out that he had driven himself there with my mom in tow. And we're like, you should have called an ambulance. And he said, well, if I do that, I have to wait the 20 minutes for the ambulance to get there, and then, and then it's another 30 miles to the hospital. Sure. And I'm like, but that ambulance could have given you,
care.
Help while in or out. And my mother has very difficult, she cannot hear, period, really, except maybe on the phone. And so the doctor would be telling her things, and luckily we got there, because she would say, what'd he say? Because she wasn't hearing any of that. So, so we finally got them to promise to at least get an ambulance. I said, you can only stay here if you promise us you're going to get an ambulance if something goes wrong. And they said, okay. And then, it's Vermont, so, sometimes there's 10 feet of snow, and an ambulance can't always get there. But anyway, so the saga of my parents.
Right.
And
which is common. It's we work with families every day that have similar stories and similar needs and similar challenges with their parents. And you had mentioned in an earlier segment having all the displacement of families, and we see that so much where mom lives here but daughter lives in Georgia, or there's 4 kids but they're all dispersed throughout the Southeast. And so the great thing is there's resources for folks and senior advisors and folks that can help out with some of those placement options.
Now, and I know in working with the seniors that we work with at the Shepherds Center, many of them wait too long.
Yes.
And you see those, because what happens is they try to get into a senior community, an independent living community, and they can't, because their health has deteriorated to the point where they won't be accepted there, because either that or they would accept them, but then they would have to bring in in-home care,
sure,
of some sort, and so they end up having to rearrange their thought process again and look at the assisted living facilities.
Right.
And so, and I guess there's no really easy way to get them to try to make the decisions sooner so they can get into the communities they want to be in.
Right. I don't know that there's a way to make the decision sooner. I think what we try to encourage families to do is to know the warning signs, see the things at home that are concerning factors. Things like weight loss, things like medications not being taken appropriately. Those, when you see those types of things, increasing falls, those are your warning signs, and hopefully you don't have too much of that before a decision's made. But more often than not, we see folks having multiple issues and multiple falls or multiple health concerns, and then by the time they do make a decision, their health has suffered as a result of it. And so we really are trying to do a lot of education. We, at Summit Place, we go out and we educate folks on what are the senior living options, and being a part of this show obviously is important to us, because I think the more educated the customer is, and the better decision that they make.
Well, and of course now, again, I'm bringing up my parents, I call them every day, and if for some reason my mom will not lie to me. And, so sometimes I'm more concerned than others, but usually she's okay and everything. But I can't tell if they're eating properly.
Sure.
Because I don't see them. I don't know if she's lost weight.
Right.
I don't know. Well, I do know that their apartment is kept clean, because I have a cousin that goes in and does that for them. Right. But, I don't know, the basic things. And like I said, I have a brother that lives 6 miles away, and he visits them at least once a week. But I don't know if he knows what to look for.
Sure.
You know, so I guess I need to be having a conversation with him, saying, you know,
Yeah.
make sure they're clean. You know, make sure that they're eating. I do know that they go out twice a week to like a senior group, and they have lunch.
Great.
And I do know that if they don't show up for lunch, that someone brings the lunch to them.
Oh, that's good.
So, which is nice in a small community to kind of watch out for each other. But other than that, so what can you tell people who aren't near their senior relatives and they can't look for the signs? What do they do? Call a neighbor and maybe have them check on them, or try to.
Sure. And I think, just to use your situation as an example, with your brother being nearby and the cousin that comes in and takes care of the apartment, those are great resources for you. And with your experience and education in senior living, that partnership between the siblings is going to be critical. So you've got the eyes that are in the apartment looking at things and seeing things, and then you've got the education experience to be able to tell them, here are some things that you need to look for. So I think with any family, there typically is some support structure somewhere. It may not be enough to support the home living environment, but if you work within your family or your neighbors or your church network, and well, this person goes and sees mom a couple of times a week, then really having good communication with that person to say, okay, when you went in today, how was mom? Anything different? Keep me posted if you see anything that's unusual. And two, a lot of times we talk about memory loss, and so there are some warning signs there that you can look for as well. So I think just having good communication, to have someone who's aware and observant of what those changing conditions are.
Okay, we've got about a minute left. Are there any parting thoughts you would like to just throw out there?
No, I would like to thank you for giving us an opportunity to be a part of this. I think it's great to just explain and go through the options. I don't think our seniors really have had a lot of understanding about the differences in the various levels of care and the differences of the services out there. And I think, with any decision, this is a huge decision of what they're going to do in their retirement years. And I think, having as much information as possible and as much education out there as possible, so that they can make a good decision and something that they're going to live well with through their senior years.
Okay, super. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's been very enjoyable. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching. Please feel free to go to the Shepherd Center website, www.shepherdscharlotte.org, or give us a call, 704-365-1995. We have a lot of services and a lot of programs going on, so you want to check us out and give us a call or check out the website. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month.